And I am the chair of the church council at Johns Creek United Methodist Church. I want to know that if you're visiting here for the first time, we welcome all. If I was to ask you what the mission statement was for Johns Creek United Methodist Church, Ruth did such a good job by saying what the complete mission statement is: making disciples of Jesus Christ for the transformation of the world. Transformation of the world, loving our God and all people by serving others. I recently heard from Jamie Martin. Jamie and Leah Martin were longtime members of this church. They moved to South Carolina to be closer to family. Jamie said many times that Johns Creek United Methodist Church changed his life forever, and I know that there are many of us here that can say the exact same thing. Jamie posted on his Facebook page that he had found a new church that was very similar to Johns Creek, in so much that it was a church of doers. I was fortunate enough to take a disciple class in which Jamie facilitated. At the end of every class, we would have a conclusion video. Jamie had a little quirk. At the end of each one of those videos, he would kind of look at you and he would say, "Whew, powerful." Our mission statement and Jamie's description of Johns Creek as doers is just that. It's powerful. The purpose of today's State of the Church is to give some insight into four areas: the state of the Methodist Church worldwide, the state of Johns Creek United Methodist Church, the financial state of Johns Creek United Methodist Church, and the future of Johns Creek. Where do we go from here? In John's Gospel, he writes, "After he washed their feet, had put on his robe, and had returned to the table, he said to them, 'Do you know what I've done to you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you're right, for that's what I am. So if I, your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash the feet of one another.'" Foot washing in those days was an act of hospitality, offered to a guest when he came to your house after a long journey. It was normally performed by servants or the guests themselves. By washing the disciples' feet, Christ combines the role of both servant and host.
Hello, my name is Mike Dudgeon. I'm the lay leader here at Johns Creek United Methodist Church, and also pray for peace and blessings in the name of Christ. You may wonder why Jeff and I, as the lay leaders, are giving the state of the church and not our Pastor D. Well, we are the church. Our clergy are certainly facilitators and leaders, but you, I, all of us are the hands and feet of Christ in the world. So as we talk about the worldwide and national Methodist Church, I'm going to start you with a thought question. Do you believe that the church's mission includes research into curing cancer? Think about that while I discuss the good and the bad going on with the national and worldwide church. First, there was a survey came out in the Pew, does a national survey on religion every several years, and the one last week pointed out that in the past 8 years, that 8% less Americans identify as Christian. So unfortunately, we are moving and swimming against a stream that's going in the wrong direction in the United States. But the Methodist Church itself has 32,000 churches and 7.3 million members, all doing the good work of Christ in the world. Johns Creek, of course, belongs to the North Georgia Conference, and we're bucking trends here. We have 361,000 members now in the North Georgia Conference, up from 342,000 in 2005. In fact, the North Georgia Conference is the largest conference in the United States. Johns Creek, in that conference, is also a growing church. Our district, the Atlanta Roswell district, had a new superintendent last year who's an in-law D. Doug Thrasher's son is married to Dee's daughter, Meredith. And we've been very grateful that the national church at the conference level and the district level has allowed the blessing of Dee to be pastor here for 17 years, and that they have rotated through an amazing cast of associate pastors. We should be very blessed with what the bigger church has done for us. And you know, the Methodist Church is very structured, and what that does, that unleashes the power of the people at a much bigger scale than you could ever do as an individual congregation. For example, the United Methodist Church sponsors 53 hospitals around the world. How could you do that with just one church? So right now, as we sit here, there are real people in the world receiving physical healing because of the work of you and the work of the church. The United Methodist Committee on Relief, or UMCOR, is one of the gold standards relief agencies in all of the world. My parents still live in my hometown of Tuscaloosa and attend Forest Lake United Methodist Church, where I grew up. Many of you know a tornado struck in April 2011 that was devastating, and the people jumped in to volunteer, including my parents. And my mother said that the first organization on the ground there organized and actually providing meaningful relief was not a government agency, it was not the Red Cross, it was UMCOR. UMCOR is on the scene in almost any disaster in this world, and again, that comes from you. Right now, they're very active in Nepal in the aftermath of the earthquake, and they're focusing on bringing water and food to those affected areas. So right now, there are people in Nepal, children, receiving aid because of you and the work of the national church. And because we are so organized and have that national structure, UMCOR doesn't have to advertise, they don't have to have extra organization. They can focus almost all of their energy and aid to true relief in this world. And that's why they get an A rating from all of the charitable rating organizations. You should have received this pamphlet, Let's Go Fishing. This pamphlet is a publication of the United Methodist Church, and there are 10 sermons at least in here about the amazing missions that God is doing in the world through your church. I really encourage you to take a look at this when you're at home and be thankful and blessed of all the things you're doing. And amazingly, all of this work is done by apportionment money that comes out of your generous giving here at the church. It's about 10% of our overall budget, of our overall giving, and about 6% of our budget. And because, again, we're organized at this national level, we are able to take that money and amplify it and do things on an amazing scale. So when I started, I asked you, did you think the church participates in cancer research? Well, it does. Because I left out the fact that the United Methodist Church sponsors 100 colleges and universities and 13 theological seminaries throughout the United States alone, including Emory, Duke, SMU. So by the power of that national church, which is thriving and doing the good work of God, we are indeed helping to look at one of the worst diseases that affects, I'm sure, has affected everyone in this room one way or the other. So I'm not going to turn it back over to Jeff to discuss the work of the church more locally here in Johns Creek. And to do that, I'm going to first read from Acts to get ready for Jeff's message. And everything I did, I showed you by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, it is more blessed to give than receive.
In 1729, while John and Charles Wesley were still at Oxford University, they began a group called the Holy Club. Members of this group pledged to be disciplined in their spiritual lives. Because they were so methodical on how they did these activities, other students called them Methodist. They used this word as kind of an insult. I take that word as a badge of honor. Love being a Methodist. In 1998, Johns Creek United Methodist Church had 800 members. In 2005, we had roughly 3,000. Currently, we have 3,900 members, and that includes 1,200 families. By definition, membership in the United Methodist Church includes those who have been baptized, plus those who have professed their faith. We have approximately 2,600 professing members. In 1998, we had a chapel and a building. We have since added a 3-story educational building and this beautiful, sacred place in which we're worshiping today. Like John Wesley, we have a method in the way that we structure ministries at Johns Creek, and we call that our Wings organization. Worship, invite, nurture, grow, and serve. I am very proud to say here today that under our Wings organization, we are living the mission statement of our church. Weddings, baptisms, funerals, special events, our music ministry all fall under the organization of worship. Our music ministry is vibrant. We have a chancel choir, 3 children choirs, an orchestra, a handbell choir, a brass ensemble. We have Music at the Creek, where we have world-famous performers that come here to perform. We have an organ unlike any other, arriving in 13 months, 2 weeks, 4 days, and 2 hours from today. Many of you have met my mother. I love my mother like a mother. So if you see her, please tell her that. But mother can be challenging. We were down in Griffin for Mother's Day, and she has been to this church. She loves this church, but she tells all of her friends the things that we do at this church. I had one of her close friends coming up to me and say, "Jeff, tell me about the organ." So I did. "Jeff, tell me about the Christmas Pops concert that you had." We had 1,500 people, by the way, that attended that Pops concert. Then it got a little creepy, and she said, "Jeff, tell me about that young red-headed guy that your mother was talking about." We have jam ministries. We have greeters. Oh, do we ever have greeters at this church? Parking lot greeters, welcome desk greeters, hospitality room greeters, special event greeters. We have a shepherd ministry program that will shepherd new members into our church family. Our recreation program falls under the category of invite. Raise your hand if you have been or have had a child involved in our recreation program. Take a look around. Nurture. All of our care ministries fall under the wing of nurture. Meals that Heal, new member luncheon, prayer shawl ministry. One of my favorite ministries is when we lay these prayer shawls upon this altar, Gil, and the children come up, lay their hands on it, and they're blessed, where we can give those to people who need them. We have Emory Healthcare Ask a Nurse, Fit Count. We have Summit Counseling Center. I would challenge each of us to come up here any night of the week and look at the number of cars that are in this parking lot. The number of lives that this congregation touches on a weekly basis is astounding. Alcohol Anonymous, Al-Anon, Nar-Anon, Narcotics Anonymous. Our Depression Bipolar Support Alliance, DBSA, is so large that we had to break it down into 2 different groups. We have Can Care. We have a compassionate friends for families who have lost a child. 4 years ago, we had 6 families that lost a child during the same year. 6. Compassionate Friends at that point did not have a chapter in North Fulton County. Our church started that chapter. The first month that Compassionate Friends met, there were 12 people there. The next month, there was 24. The month after that, we had to bring in chairs to support those many people who were hurting. We have divorce support, Financial Peace University, prostate cancer support, PFLAG, after suicide support, widower support, grief support. We are a Stephen Ministry church. We currently have 50 active Stephen ministers who are taking one-to-one Christian care of people who are in crises. These Stephen ministers go through extensive not only initial training, but continuing education. I had Chet Burdick prepare for me an estimate of the number of hours that our Stephen ministers will be involved in the year 2015. That number came up to 6,230 hours. All of our education classes fall under our area of grow: nursery, day camp, trunk and treat, winter shoe boxes, vacation Bible school. Vacation Bible school will have close to 500 participants. And Jenna said to please remind you, we do need volunteers for that. Vacation Bible school is not the Vacation Bible school that we grew up with. It's themed now. I think that this year is going to be motocross or something. So it's not to come to get your juice and cookies anymore. Preschool. I had the opportunity to ask a young mother who had just enrolled their child into our preschool program, and I asked her, I said, tell me the reason why you chose Johns Creek. I loved what she said. I loved the community feel. I loved how welcoming everyone was. I loved the structure and the biblical teachings. And this is what I love the most. She said, of all the places that we were looking, I felt like it was the most comfortable place to send my daughter. We have great day of service. Every fall, hundreds out of this congregation go throughout the community to help with painting and landscaping, working with children. Our great day of service partners with the Gateway Center, Open Hands Atlanta, Norcross Cooperative, United Methodist Children's Home. We support Rainbow Village. We do a blood drive 4 times a year. Norcross Co-op's involved. Trinity Soup Kitchen, Adopt a Family, Stop Hunger Now, Helping Hands. We do mission trips at this church. Johns Creek United Methodist Church partners with Mission Guatemala, sending mission teams every year. We support the feeding center that is named after this church. Every day, we feed 100 children that go to the Johns Creek United Methodist Church Feeding Center. We have mission trips to Mozambique, the Bahamas, and as Brian mentioned, we have one that's going to Tennessee, Cumberland Plateau in Grundy County, Tennessee. You know, I mentioned these exotic places, but this Appalachian region is poverty-stricken. And can you say Appalachia without thinking of our brother Christopher Carlton? Scouts, oh my stars. We sponsor Girl Scouts and Boy Scouts. We have 8 Boy Scout troops, 4 packs, 3 troops, and 1 crew. We have had 140 Eagle Scouts that have come out of this congregation. All of these things, all of these support groups, all of these ministries happen for one reason, because they are funded from our general fund that you give to this church. I read from the Gospel of Mark. And he sat down opposite the treasury and began observing how the people were putting money into the treasury. And many rich people were putting in large sums. A poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins, which amounted to about 1 cent. Calling his disciples, he said to them, "Truly I say to you, this poor widow put in more than all the contributors to the treasury, for they all put in out of their surplus. But she, out of her poverty, she put in all she owned, and all she had to live on.
As we turn to the financial state of the church, I'll ask you my thought question. What do you think the church budget is, and how many of our 1,200 families do you think contribute? Over the past 15 years, this church has been blessed to have great financial health. For most of that time, we had strong cash reserves on hand. When we embarked on the building the sanctuary project, we did that during the Great Recession. And most people, well, not most people, some people said, that's too hard, the economy's down, we shouldn't do it. Through the leadership of Dee and many others, we made it happen. During that planning process, we did project some conservative, but some increase in membership growth from the new sanctuary. When we did open it in February 2013, Andy was up there singing Sanctuary from the balcony, and I got chills. And then the PA system turned on, and we embarked on the 18 months of roller coaster sound issues that we know, unfortunately, affected our ability to grow this ministry during that time. But during that time and during the down economy, it's so important to emphasize we never stopped doing the mission of the church. In fact, we've increased the missions of the church. The list that Jeff went over has gotten bigger and bigger as we've grown. And there's been a few high-profile additions to the church in the past few years. I wanted to make sure you understood how they affected the finances of the church. Did acquire the Mount Zion property a few years back, but due to a gift that does not have an impact on our general fund. The fantastic counseling center we have is operating in the black. The Trinity Wall Street organ, the over $1 million, is going to be paid for by pretty much less than 10 families who felt called to give that gift as a blessing to our community. So when you turn to the general fund of the church's operational fund, it is the lifeblood of Johns Creek. Everything that Jeff talked about comes from there. It pays for our clergy utilities just for you to be in here today. So I asked you at the beginning, what do you think our budget is? Well, it is $4.5 million last year, of which $2.8 million is offerings. $1.2 million comes from our preschool. $230,000 comes from recreation. And of the 1,200 families in the church, last year 394 did a pledge, making the average pledge $5,500. If you count all of our 1,200 families and count what's called loose plate offering, which is money that's not pledged but given to us, the average contribution per family was $2,300. The median family income in our area is $122,000 a year. So the past 4 to 5 years of giving have put a financial pressure on the church that we've not seen recently. The church budget year ending June 30th will be $155,000 short of pledge commitments. But with our wonderful stewards working on the finances of the church and strict expense management and using up the last of our cash reserves, we will end the year without a cash flow shortfall, which is a blessing. We did postpone some needed maintenance, and our staff is going for the 4th year in a row without a raise. So the situation presents challenges, but there's a great blessing hitting here. Consecration Sunday this year was a spiritual and financial success for our congregation. We had a 16% increase in the number of dollars pledged and a 14% increase in the number of pledging families, up to 454. It's an amazing blessing that our families and our congregation has stepped up to commit more spiritually to the mission of the church. And on behalf of the church, I want to say thanks to Tim Milam, to Melinda Jones, Dr. Bill Self, and all the others who led us in such a successful campaign for giving. So it is wonderful that we have those new pledges, but there's an important point that has to be made about how the church does offerings. We get about $500,000 a year in what's called loose plate offerings, or money that was not pledged. So even though we have new pledges, some of that is coming, we know, from people who were paying before, but are now going to just give a formal pledge with it. So we cannot book a 16% increase in our revenues. So moving forward to next year, we've had the success, but we're still in a pressured situation. But because we're responsible stewards of the finances, your finances, for next budget year, we're looking at a cut of around $400,000 to the program services of the church. It really gives me pains to have to tell you that. Jeff, Dee, Sam Lewis, our finance chair, Jennifer Tilson, and many others have been struggling and praying with this for the past several months. I think many of you know I'm in the legislature, and I'm okay discussing budget cuts, but when it's my church and it's the mission of Christ, it breaks my heart. Therefore, programs for next year, such as Wednesday night supper, advertising to increase the 950 service, and several others are on the table as possible cutbacks. The church council will have final say in June, but there's no getting around the need. We'll have to make some significant cuts. We again will probably postpone maintenance on the facility, and the staff will again continue their amazing work for us without a raise. This is sad in our community of such affluence. As I said earlier, that the operational budget is that lifeblood. And it's so important to know, though, that the missions of the church are continuing. We are not slowing down. The things that Jeff talked about are what we are called to do, and the church will continue to do them. And our leadership is more committed than ever, the lay and the clergy, to working with the stewardship to increase the missions of the church, to build our cash reserves, and have life be really good, which it is good at Johns Creek right now and will be good into the future. So now, to prepare for Jeff to talk about the future, I'll read from the Gospel of Matthew. He told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed, which a man took and planted in his field. Though it is the smallest of all seeds, yet when it grows, it is the largest of garden plants and becomes a tree, so that the birds come and perch in its branches.
I borrowed this picture from Dr. Shelnutt's office. You can probably see that it is a cross, but it's a three-dimensional picture. The cross in the background, it's full of dirt. The dirt that is in this picture is from the day that we broke ground for this sanctuary. At the very bottom is a mustard seed. This mustard seed represents the ever-growing vision that this congregation has. We are a growing church. This church is fruitful. We are bearing fruit in everything that we do. Every support group, every ministry. With every note that will be played from that organ, we're bearing fruit. Every step that a child makes when he's in preschool, every step that he'll do when he's in the rec program, we're bearing fruit. If anything that you take away from today's message, and I'll speak right now to all of our high school seniors that are going to be recognized, know that Johns Creek United Methodist Church is a church with open hearts, open minds, and open doors. We are a church of hospitality. Amen.